It's an election Tuesday. Election of the top 25 teams in college football, that is. Welcome in, everyone, whether you're watching on the main channel, on the Michigan channel, the Ohio State channel, LSU, Alabama, USC, how about Oregon as well? We welcome in everyone, wherever you are, across our great nation. Welcome into the Voice of College Football and our weekly watch party for the college football playoff rankings unveiling. I will leave the link to the show in the chat. Give me a call as soon as the top 25 is released and we can take it in. We will hear from you. I had made the statement at this point last week that the placement of TCU was going to tell me more than anything else. And TCU was placed at number 7 in the country, and that told us a lot, with a one-loss Alabama team placed ahead of TCU. And then a number of other teams within sight, including LSU at their position last week of number 10. Now LSU has posted maybe the most improbable win, big win of the season. Of course, we got to see Tennessee, Georgia. That's going to be the intriguing part for me this week, is going to see, where does Tennessee drop? I talked about this last week. We talked about it together. The loser of the Georgia-Tennessee game, how far would they drop? That shows us what the committee thinks of the SEC and those two particular teams. Of course, Clemson, how far will they drop? Most people believe that they are completely out of the playoff race. I am not one of them. I do believe that there's a viable path, but it's improbable. So we will get you the link. And let's do this as only we can here at the Voice of College Football with all of you. Let's watch the top 25. I'm glad at this point in the season, with only 3 games left, that all the conferences are still in play. I am glad of that even the Pac-12 not only has just one team carrying the banner, as it's been a number of times since the last time the Pac-12 reached the playoffs in 2016. It's typically been Oregon, has had a couple shots at making the playoff, that being in 2019 and 2021, that Oregon had a shot late in the season. But now we've got multiple teams. So there are multiple options for the Pac-12. It's not all riding on one team. I believe that USC is the most viable candidate for a number of reasons. There's not that direct comparison between Oregon and Georgia if you look at the USC resume. Also, USC can get that late season push against UCLA and Notre Dame. Those could be 2 impressive wins for the Trojans. And UCLA without the non-conference schedule to really validate their resume. So the Pac-12 is down to 3. And again, that does my heart good to see the Pac-12 with 3 in competition for a playoff spot. The SEC, my goodness, one team gets knocked out in Alabama, seemingly knocked out. I think the tide's dead. I think, but if anybody's still alive, that most likely is not going to win its conference championship with 2 losses, that would be Alabama. But LSU is not infallible by any stretch, and they've got Arkansas this week. Arkansas is not playing well, but still they've got to go on the road to Arkansas. The Hogs are just a 3-point underdog at home. So consider this. LSU wins probably the second, third most important and most impressive game of the season, and they're on a roll. They've beaten Ole Miss in recent weeks by 4 scores. They're going to Fayetteville to take on an Arkansas team that just lost to Liberty, and it's only a 3-point game. LSU is going to have to bounce back from that emotional high, go to Fayetteville for an 11 a.m. start, 11 a.m. kickoff, local time in Fayetteville on Saturday, trap spot for LSU. If you watch me on a regular basis, you know I don't necessarily believe in the trap game in terms of statistics backing up that it's valid, but I understand the theory and the situation revolving around a trap game, and that's the perfect definition. All right, let's look at the top 25. Washington won this past weekend against Oregon State. They're at 7-2. Kentucky at number 24. The Cats coming off a win against Missouri. Florida State impressive over Miami. Jumps into the rankings as well. We got UCF at number 22 after a win themselves against Memphis, and Illinois at 7-2. So we will most likely have 2 group of 5 teams in the top 25 college football rankings. The Illini fall 6 spots or 5 spots from number 16 to 21 after the loss to Michigan State. Here's the next 5. Notre Dame jumps into the rankings impressively against Clemson, of course. Kansas State, they lost to Texas, who jumps ahead of them with the same record. So Texas now at number 18. We see Tulane jumping a couple more spots with another win this past weekend. And NC State, they looked impressive over Wake Forest this past weekend at home. They are now 7-2 at number 16. So a lot of major jumps and shifts there by 5 and 6 spots there. And Notre Dame into the rankings is the highest non-ranked team, I would think, from last week to this week, all the way up to number 20. All right, let's get to the next grouping here. Let's see where Clemson fell. That should be in the next group here. Nope, Clemson's still in the top 10. Look at that. North Carolina at 15. Penn State at 14. Utah at 13. UCLA stays put. Ole Miss stays at put. The Rebels did not play this past weekend. They play Alabama. UCLA, there they are at 8-1. Not in a great position at number 12 in the country, but they've got USC potentially, of course, in a Pac-12 championship game. Utah, they're at number 13, of course. Consider the Utah loss to UCLA. So they're giving Utah a lot of credit considering they got whipped pretty good by UCLA, and they've got a 1-game less win total. So I'm not so sure about the UCLA-Utah rankings. Penn State at 14, North Carolina at 15, and of course the Tar Heels are in great position to run to the ACC championship game. Clemson at 10, there they are. They dropped 6 spots. So Clemson, can they gain ground? Well, they got South Carolina. After a game this weekend against Louisville that's turning out to be a more difficult game than we anticipated a few weeks ago. Louisville's on a roll of 4 consecutive wins. So Clemson's got Louisville. They've got a game against South Carolina. Then they will have North Carolina most likely in the championship game. But Clemson's big issue is how they lost to Notre Dame. Not that they lost the game necessarily, but that they lost in a huge fashion. They got smacked around. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Chrissy does not like Clemson still in the top 10, believes that's a joke. I've got Clemson, I believe, at 11. Smooth Criminals says Alabama's still hanging around. Yes, they are. They're at least at 9, if not higher. ABC, appreciate you being here. There we go. Bama's at 9. They dropped 3 spots. And this is a situation in which this is what makes the rankings difficult, because if Alabama is truly the 9th best team in the country, they lost on the road in the last seconds on a 2-point conversion, 32-31, to a team that's ranked above them, probably at number 6, number 7. Well, shouldn't Alabama do that? Isn't that what Alabama should be doing? The number 9 team in the country. USC goes up a spot, even though they defeated Cal. And when you really think about it, think about this. What's more impressive? What is a more valid result? USC barely beating an awful Cal team, or Alabama losing to one of the best teams in the country on the road in Death Valley by 1 point? What's a more valid result? And this, of course, is when you've got to honor the wins and the losses. All right, so the new college football top 7 revealed next. Hopefully we're not going to a break. Let's see what you guys have to say. Mark says going to find out how much SEC love the committee has. Of course, the SEC does have the best wins in the country. That's my defense for the SEC. Yeah, there's a lot of love by the committee for the SEC. There's no way that they are unbiased concerning anybody, but in particular the SEC. They know the brand Alabama. They know the brand Georgia. They know the brand SEC. And it filters in. There is no doubt about that. No doubt that filters in. But let's also understand that the SEC is the best conference. It's the best conference. That's been proven through the years, which should not impact this. But the SEC is the best conference this year. It is the best wins out of conference.
Joseph, I agree with you. You can look at Oregon and say, look at how big a loss they had to Georgia. You also have to look at those circumstances with Dan Lanning taking over, new quarterback that came in from Auburn, first game that they play of the year, travel across the country and play in Atlanta, basically a home game for Georgia. The message to Rob Mullins is schedule Portland State. Like, why do you want to schedule Georgia and lose a game like that? If you schedule Portland State, they're undefeated, and everybody's talking about how great Oregon is because, Joey, what you're saying is throw the metrics out. They're playing right now like one of those teams you don't want to get on the field with. They have something over the course. Buzz,
you're laughing out loud, aren't you? Yeah, this shows where our hearts are, doesn't it? I will be watching election coverage tonight. I will be watching the election coverage. Just curious. Just curious. Colvarks, good point. Liberty is not ranked, are they? Liberty is not ranked after defeating Arkansas and being at number 8-1 now on the season. However, what have they really done outside of beating Arkansas? And is that a great win? That's their best win by far. And they beat Gardner-Webb by 1. So that's where it makes it tough. Liberty's wins and losses say that they should be ranked, but really, should they be ranked? All right, let's get to it. All right, we're going the opposite direction. Didn't we count up last week? They're going right to us with Georgia at number 1. Now, does Ohio State suffer from its loss or its near loss, whatever you want to call that game against they're throwing them out there. Okay, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3. That makes total sense based on what it was last week. So Tennessee's probably going to be at 4, correct? Yeah, they're strategizing the reveal more than they used to. They used to just kind of roll up, but they're basically knowing that everybody's looking at Georgia as the number 1 team, and it's what happens after that. Now, TCU, this is where the committee makes no sense. I have no issue with TCU at number 4. I've got them at number 2, so I've got no issue with them being as high as number 4, but they were 7th last week. They were number 7 last week. And they barely beat Texas Tech and actually got a phantom face mask call that set up their comeback. Tennessee's at number 5. So then we're going to have, it just all depends on LSU and Oregon. I would think Oregon would be 6 and LSU 7. That's where I've got them placed. Here we go. Tennessee at 5. I thought they were only going to drop to 4. TCU barely beat Texas Tech, a decent team, and they jump by 3 spots. Okay. So I don't have any issue with this so far, except for where the teams were placed last week. So, all right, let's go. LSU and Oregon. I would think this is going to be Oregon at 6 and LSU at 7. I don't remember where Oregon was last week. I think they were at 8. I think they were 8. So they should jump to 6. And LSU from 10 to 7. Come on. Yes, we are waiting on LSU and Oregon. Exactly, Reese. There we go. Oregon at number 6. And that means LSU's at number 7. Okay, there we have it. I'm going to record this because I want to hear from the committee, but I'll watch that later because I want to hear from all of you now. All right, let's go to you. Got Alex on the line. Alex, how you doing tonight, man?
Hey, good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I got you now.
All right. So, yeah. First of all, big fan of the show. Happy to be on.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate that.
I think overall the rankings are very accurate. I think a couple teams should have switched. Mainly TCU and Tennessee should have switched, as well as Michigan and Ohio State. I think Michigan should be out too. But overall, pretty good job from the committee. I agree with what everyone said. Like the initial rankings don't really matter because everything sort of sorts itself out in the last few weeks or so with all the big matchups that always tend to happen. So yeah, the playoff picture became quite a bit more clear, and there's sort of less room for error from the committee, in my opinion.
All right, Alex, I agree with you that Michigan should be ranked ahead of Ohio State, and that TCU. So you're good with TCU ahead of Tennessee.
I actually wanted Tennessee to drop to 4. I think that was fair to only drop 3.
Yeah. I think based on the way they had it set up last week with TCU at 7 and Tennessee all the way up at number 1, that Tennessee going on the road, losing to the best team in the country,
right,
and TCU really playing an unimpressive game against Texas Tech at home. They were losing that game halfway through the fourth quarter, that wasn't enough for TCU to pass Tennessee.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, TCU doesn't have 5 ranked wins. Tennessee does that. So I mean, overall, the best by far resume. I mean, you got to wonder how much Tennessee would beat Texas Tech. I'd say probably by at least 4 or 5 touchdowns. So, I mean, I do think they're the better team. But I'll tell you what, that Oregon loss is looking better and better to Georgia. And if there are a couple upsets happen, we very well could see a rematch of that in the semis.
Yeah. Tennessee didn't lose to Oregon or Georgia anything close to what Oregon did, but it at least shows that the team that was ranked number 1 in the country also got whacked by Georgia. So that's what that shows. So
Yeah.
I'm not getting all of Tennessee's ranked wins. Kentucky, Alabama, LSU.
Okay. Maybe there were. Well, I do know there were a couple teams that were ranked when.
When they played.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not ranked now. Okay, like Pitt, probably.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe Florida.
Yeah. But yeah, that Michigan Ohio State game is shaping up to be a doozy. Let me tell you.
It sure is. I think both teams are better than they were last year.
Yeah.
Especially Michigan.
And especially with the storyline too. I mean, Michigan really did end up upsetting them, and it was 3,000 days before they got their win. So it's just like with the storyline in general, compared with how high and how skilled these teams are, should be an instant classic.
I would think so. It's shaping up to be one. All right, Alex, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Not too much.
Okay. Thanks for dropping by.
Thanks.
Call us anytime.
All right.
It's our guy Alex stopping by for a little college football chat to lead us off here. We're going for 2 straight hours here at the Voice of College Football. We got Chris on the line. Chris, how you doing?
Good. Can you tell me again I'm sorry, Mark, I was distracted, I guess, while you were announcing the top 4. Who was the top 4 again?
The top 4 are Georgia number 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, and TCU 4.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe I'd heard the way your conversation went with the last guy. I thought maybe they had Tennessee 4th there, but because wasn't he saying something about Tennessee being a little bit better maybe as far as a team than Texas Christian?
Well, simply that the committee ranked Tennessee number 1 last week and ranked TCU number 7.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I understand. Yeah,
Tennessee lost a game against what everyone considers to be the best team in the country.
Yeah.
And TCU had a pretty unimpressive win against a 4-5 Texas Tech team at home.
Right. Well, I guess I was just gonna maybe ask you. So these games coming up, like we kind of know mostly, like for example, Texas Christian playing. Will that be a way maybe to kind of get a better angle, I think, on where Texas, since they have to go to Texas, that's where Alabama played Texas, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like where you're going. Yeah, I've mentioned that a few times myself. We'll have that direct comparison between Texas Christian and Alabama, and then all the teams that Alabama played.
But since Alabama has 2 losses, how does that going to necessarily? Alabama's not really the top team anymore, so does that really
a direct correlation anymore? But Alabama lost on the last play of the game in both games that they lost. They are not far from being at the top. Right.
The other question I think I might, just before you let me go, I don't know if you saw it or not. I think I put it on your the evaluation for the top 25. What I do is I try to go back and assess each conference separately. And what I found out, I think, was that the best conference seems to be the Southeastern Conference. And then if I did it correctly, then the second best conference should be the Big Ten. And then I think the Big 12 is the 3rd best conference. And then it was the Atlantic Coast Conference and then the Pacific 12. So they all kind of fall in line. But do you think that if that's right, if I did it correctly, how does that impact, or should it impact the rankings if they have like a ranking there?
I think it should impact the rankings because they are charged to compare teams from different conferences. So if one particular team is playing in a more difficult conference, then they should be judged as such. My question to you, Chris, would be, do those conference rankings, do they have anything to do with the games that are played within the conference? Do the games within the conference impact those rankings or those ratings at all?
Well, I could tell you, but like I said, I think you don't want to lose. I think you get concerned that I might distract people from wanting to tune in. But all I really do is I go back and I take the ratings that are already online, and then I make an adjustment to them so that I can figure out roughly where they compare against each other. And after I do that, I have to add them all together. and I just get a composite is all it is. And the composite tells me where they finish, but I guess the question might be whether I'm doing it right. That part I'm not sure about, but
Okay.
yeah, I think
My question basically was a yes or no question. Do the games within the conference, do they impact the rating?
I don't honestly know how the ratings are applied because I'm taking them from Sports Reference, and they have their own formula, Mark, and I take that rating and I make an adjustment to it, and so I can't really say I know for sure that they do or not. Is what I tell you. So,
well, anything else tonight?
well, yeah,
Chris?
there was one other question. I think you already talked about it, but I think Liberty, I mean, I don't really have them rated all that high, to be honest with you. I think I just barely have them inside the top 25, but if the committee doesn't have Liberty in the top 25, I don't think that's really fair to Liberty, is it?
Well, that's a good point. They just knocked off a decent Arkansas team. Their only loss is a 1-point loss to a team in Wake Forest that has been ranked the entire season up until this week. And however, their schedule is rather weak. And that's the difficulty that I have. And I think the difficulty that anyone takes ranking seriously is trying to compare teams that have better records but play much weaker schedules in the group of 5 versus teams in the Power 5 that play more difficult schedules. It's a difficult measurement to make. It's apples and oranges, as they say.
Well, I guess this is kind of a plug, I guess, from what I do, and I'm not trying to push anything on you, Mark, but I think what I do, if I'm doing it correctly, that's the big question mark, is whether I'm doing it correctly. But for their, if you take a look, and I sent you, I think, through an email the ratings or whatever, but if you look at it, you'll notice that for their record, they're 7-1. They're really not rated that very high compared to the other teams around them. So I think I take that into account, the strength of schedule. But I still have them in the top 25. That's why I'm confused why they wouldn't be ranked in the top 25. I think they probably should be, maybe just barely. I think I have them like 23rd or 24th.
Okay.
I thought I'd share that.
Certainly.
All right. Have a good day.
Thanks, Chris.
Good night.
All right. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We did have a question there from Oscar, who says, why is LSU ahead of USC? Alabama should have 4 losses and giving the SEC way too much credit, like always. Well, yeah, you can make that claim, but the SEC does have the best non-conference wins. Therefore, the SEC is the best conference. That's not debatable in any such way. And I'm not even relying on recruiting rankings or NFL draft selections or previous seasons. This season, the SEC is the best conference. It's been proven in the non-conference play. LSU has lost to 2 of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. And they just defeated one of the best teams in the country. I'm sorry, LSU, of course, one of their 2 losses was to one of the best teams in the country, and they just have a better resume than USC. Now, should USC be ranked ahead of LSU? That's certainly a valid and arguable point. I'm not saying that LSU definitely should be ranked ahead of USC, but I rank them ahead of USC because they play a much more difficult schedule. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got DeAndre on the line. Hey, man.
Hey, Mark. How you doing, man?
I'm good.
So I'll keep it quick for you. I got 3 comments.
Sure.
First off, Clemson fans should calm down. Because you go back to 2014, Oregon lost to Arizona at home and still made the playoffs. Georgia lost 2017 to Auburn at home by 21 points? Was it 28-7? 2017?
Yes, Georgia lost. Hang on, that was a blowout. Georgia lost
to Auburn, 28-7 at Georgia.
Yeah, 28-7.
Yeah, and the point I'm trying to make is, just like what you said about Oregon, Oregon went down to the South to play Georgia with a new coordinators and stuff. Clemson went out to Notre Dame, lost in a cold weather game, which they usually don't play a lot, and they lost the game. There's no excuse they lost the game, period. But there's history about teams losing 2 in the playoffs, and this new playoff era of them still making the playoffs. And if you look ahead, a lot of these schools still got to play each other. Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, USC, UCLA, USC. LSU, I think, got to still play Ole Miss. Am I correct? Or they already lost to Ole Miss?
They beat Ole Miss.
Okay. So my next issue. Don't get me wrong. LSU will probably beat Clemson right now because of the way Clemson defense is playing. I hate that they keep blaming DJ, but I would like to make this point, and I think I brought it up last week. Let's say LSU does lose another game. How in the world can you put LSU over Florida State if they lose another game? They got the same record. So that's why I have an issue with these rankings. I kind of agree with the
Okay.
last guy. Go ahead. I know you already explained to me that you can't do it because it affects it, but that's going by the records. If you're 8-1 and the other team has 2 losses, you haven't played that team, but your record should be better. The team up front should be better if they're 8-1 compared to 7-2. I know everybody said, well, it's not equal. They don't play the same schedule, but Clemson beat 3 ranked teams, correct?
So you're telling me, DeAndre, and I'm not saying that this is wrong, but you're saying that all the rankings should be in order of record. You should have all the.
I totally. That's the way I see it. You got 2 losses. I'm not saying that Clemson is better. That should be ranked above Tennessee or Oregon, but USC, Clemson, UCLA, they definitely should come in before LSU. I understand LSU got a new coaching staff. They lost to Florida State earlier in the year. I can't remember who else LSU lost to, but a one-win team should be ahead of that. And that's what I'm saying. It doesn't make any sense because let's say they lose. Let's say LSU wins out. They lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game. How can you put LSU ahead of Florida State and Florida State beat LSU? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay. Florida State is not going to a conference championship game.
No, but that's not what I said. I said,
hang on. I didn't finish. I didn't
Okay.
finish.
Okay.
So Florida State is not going to a conference championship game. LSU,
Right.
in your scenario, is going to a conference championship game. And
Right.
even if they lose to Georgia, they will be 10-3, and Florida State will be 9-3. So even if you go by your record sequence, LSU should be ranked ahead of Florida State. But I can give you about 82 other reasons why they should be ranked ahead of Florida State.
But they play head to head.
Better record.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. But they play head to head.
They will have a better record.
Okay.
Every team that plays that, you mean that every team that has a head-to-head win should, regardless of their record?
No. That's all I'm saying. Right now, who does LSU play this weekend?
They're playing Arkansas.
Okay, more than likely.
You're saying that if they lose to Arkansas and Florida State wins, that Florida State should be ranked ahead of LSU.
Exactly, because of the head-to-head.
Okay. The point I'm making, I completely agree with your theory or with your approach, your point. In theory, I always do my very best to rank teams that won the game on the field ahead of the other teams, but you impact all other ranked teams and you displace them. So, for example, South Carolina beat Kentucky. Kentucky beat Mississippi State. Mississippi State beat Arkansas. Arkansas beat South Carolina. What if they all have the same record? Then who do you
probably do because I'm not looking at the records right now because I can't see them on the board. But whoever had the head win. South Carolina's not ranked, right?
I just explained to you, you can't do that.
Okay.
You can't do it because South Carolina beat Kentucky and Kentucky beat Mississippi State and Mississippi State beat Arkansas and Arkansas beat South Carolina. They all beat one another. So you can't honor the head-to-head.
Okay. But I don't see how you're going to come up with a fair system because if you beat them head-to-head on the field, what else you put in there? Because I'm just saying, this is what I apologize for getting off track. You can't tell me that LSU with 2 losses should be ranked ahead of Southern Cal. I understand you might say Southern Cal plays, LSU played in a harder division, harder conference, but that doesn't mean they're going to win on the field. But by record-wise, Southern Cal should be ahead of LSU.
Yeah. Well, simply, you believe that the ranking should go exactly in order of record.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't care what their schedules are.
Right. I can't help who they play. like I see y'all talk. I heard y'all talk about Liberty. I'm gonna let you go after this, but this is what I got to say about Liberty. BYU probably has a bigger budget than Liberty, correct?
Yes.
Arkansas probably has a bigger budget and more recruiting programs than Liberty.
Yes.
So they beat two traditional. Well, I'm not gonna say when I say traditional powers, they're traditionally pretty good teams. So they beat those two teams that has bigger budgets, bigger fan bases.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So I give them respect for that. But I'll let everybody else get a chance to talk, Mark. You have a great night, man.
Thanks, DeAndre. Appreciate you being here. So I agree with what DeAndre's saying in regards to I can understand it. I shouldn't say I agree with it. I understand his point that he simply wants to say schedules be damned, whoever has the best record. So you line up all the 0-loss teams, then you line up all the 1-loss teams, 2-loss teams, 3-loss teams. And then I guess you go to schedule because obviously you've got a tie for all those positions. So I don't know what he does about that. But I get his point. However, that especially breaks down when you involve the group of 5, and the group of 5 is involved. Before we take our next call, Rocky's here. Rocky, appreciate you being here. And for the question, is there a scenario where Michigan and Ohio State get in? Yeah, there are scenarios. I'll give you one. I'll try to give you the most reasonable scenario off the top of my head, understanding, Rocky, that there's no formula to this. If there was a formula, then we could release the formula and everybody could just calculate the formula and say, well, here are the 8 ways in which Ohio State and Michigan both get into the playoff. But we don't know that because it's a subjective decision by a committee. So this is all speculation based on just what we can try to determine what they are thinking. All right, here would be one. Georgia wins the SEC. That knocks out LSU. Tennessee loses a game, most likely to Kentucky. That knocks out Tennessee. So you've got one team from the SEC, Georgia. Then you've got, of course, let's say Michigan loses the game against Ohio State. They've got to play that game extremely close, look impressive otherwise. In 2 weeks against Illinois would help against a ranked team. TCU either just loses once, maybe enough, as the Big 12 champion, and the winner of the Pac-12 losing another game. We've got 4 teams in the Pac-12 with at least one loss vying for the championship. So the Pac-12 winner is going to have at least one loss and may have 2. The championship game may involve a 2-loss team. They could win the championship game in the Pac-12. So there's a few ways. Hello, Mike. What's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, can't complain. Just enjoying the show.
Nice.
I know there's a lot of people. Oh, ignore the Band-Aid. I cut myself shaving earlier. I have all these colored Band-Aids. I have to throw out all the red ones, but
I can't say that I noticed that. You're tiny, tiny, tiny in the screen, just like I am.
Oh, I'll scoot up a little bit. Because I know a lot of my fellow Wolverines, they're kind of hoping that we'd jump too, but it's like after what Notre Dame did to Clemson, there's literally no way that was going to happen. Say Notre Dame beating Clemson pushed Ohio State's strength of schedule up considerably, I'm pretty sure. And I think they're also going to take into account the weather for the Northwestern game.
Well, I don't know that they should, but that was just one game. I don't take it into consideration. I take it into consideration of how I evaluate Ohio State as a team and what I think they can do in the future, but that doesn't impact my rankings, the weather. It's football.
Yeah, I know. Big Ten kind of gets hurt on that aspect more than the SEC because, they might deal with, an occasional shower, but they're not dealing with snow and bitter cold or anything. Now, one thing I still think that records matter. I mean, I've always been under the impression that if you're in a Power 5 and you're undefeated, you need to be up there. So that's why I tend to. I mean, I don't think TCU is the 4th best team in the country, but I think them being 4 is where they need to be.
Okay.
And I personally think that Tennessee and TCU on a neutral field, I think that'd be closer than a lot of people think. I think there are a lot of people that just think Tennessee would just, name the score on them, and I don't see it that way.
No, I don't believe that. I believe that they're a better team. I would predict that game somewhere in the 42-28 range, 2 touchdowns.
And I probably would put it within a touchdown myself. But I think that's also because I have little to no respect for Tennessee's defense, at least not their passing. And TCU, they're pretty one-dimensional. If they have a running game, I don't know of it.
Well, I don't know about that. They've got a pretty good back in Vendray Miller. He's run for 100 yards about 5 straight games. He ran for 150 something against Texas Tech.
Because every time I look at highlights, I just see Max just throwing the ball 400 yards a game. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think a 2-loss seller. I know, they've had, some pretty good wins, but they've had 2 losses, and one of them was just a complete drubbing. A 2-loss team that lost that badly doesn't need to be in the top 7.
LSU.
Yeah.
Regardless of who they've beaten.
Yeah, I know they beat, but a lot of that also comes back to they beat Bama, and at this point, Alabama is the name. People are voting for the name. People are rooting for the name. People are wanting to see the name. They're not actually looking at the team. This team is in disarray.
They're in disarray.
Yes.
I think 99% of the teams in America, probably every team in America not named Georgia, would like to be in such disarray. I know that Alabama takes a hit, and I'm somebody who's taken shots at them as well, especially after the Texas game, in which I did not believe the better team on the field won that particular game. But other than that, we do realize that this goes both ways, that Alabama's, I can't put my fingers close enough together to share with everyone how close they are to being 9-0. They lost in 2 of the most difficult places to play, and they lost on the last play of the game. And this team's in disarray.
Well, this is also a team that could be 5-4 as well.
Yeah, they're not a 5-4 team. We all know that.
Yeah, I know they're not a 5-4 team, but they could have played. They've been playing like they could be a 5-4 team.
Yeah, I think they're much closer to 9-0 than 5-4.
Well, they were one play from losing to Texas A&M. All Texas A&M had to do was just score from the 2-yard line, and that game's over.
Sure, but they were also playing with their backup quarterback. They were playing without maybe the best player in the country.
And I remember making that case.
So,
recently, but I also made the fact that A&M's also playing a backup quarterback.
Well, depending on who you think they're, Texas A&M's in such disarray, they don't even know who their quarterback is. You could make an argument about amongst 3 guys.
Well, once they made the switch from Haynes King to Max Johnson, they kind of lit a spark.
Here's a stat for you, Mike. TCU is 9th in the country in rushing yards per attempt.
9th.
Yep.
Wow.
They can run the ball.
Well, that's kind of a shot on the people that think that TCU has no offensive line, because you can't have that many rushing yards per game and have a terrible offensive line. I mean, unless you're Barry Sanders.
Yeah, they don't have any of those guys.
So I guess their offensive line must be decent.
They're 1 spot behind Michigan.
Oh, that's some pretty rarefied air there, because we all know that our run game's solid.
Alabama's awful rushing attack is 3rd in the nation in yards per attempt.
3rd?
Yep.
I'd have lost that bet. Well, now I do know that Alabama's offense, I mean, they're not terrible. I mean, they're pretty good. Alabama's weakness is the defense, in my opinion, specifically the secondary.
Yep. Now, granted, I would want to take out, let's say, FCS opponents or weak group of 5 opponents when looking at these stats. Plus, they involve sack yardage too. But anyway, it's close enough.
Yeah, I keep forgetting. Is it the NFL that sacks go against passing and college goes against rushing, or is it the other way around?
Yes.
Yeah, so I knew I'm constantly mixing those two stats up because I know that the NFL switches it around.
Yeah, I hate the way college does it.
And I think I think my point might be amplified next week because I think Saturday is when Alabama goes down to Oxford and plays Ole Miss, isn't it?
Yes.
I like Ole Miss in that game, especially now. So
Well, Ole Miss is still playing. They might be the most or the least talked about team that has a playoff path.
and I think they're kind of hurting from the fact that LSU still controls the destiny over Ole Miss, even though they have 2 losses.
Yes,
Which
because
I don't like.
they lost head to head. But Ole Miss could be sitting there at 11-1 at the end of the year. You talk about a screwed up playoff scenario. What if LSU wins the SEC? So they've got a 2-loss championship team, and then you've got Georgia with 1 loss, 12-1. Tennessee and Ole Miss both go 11-1. 4
No.
teams in the SEC have 1 loss or are the champion.
Yeah, I hate to play devil's advocate here, but I couldn't even play devil. I'm trying to wrap my head around a scenario where that could happen, and I don't think the committee could even possibly fathom a 4-team SEC. I don't even think they can really realistically do 3.
Well, I'm not saying that they should put them in. I'm just saying that there could be 4 teams with a resume worthy of consideration from one conference.
Well, and I do say Ole Miss does have. I mean, they don't have the easiest schedule coming down the pipe, but
No.
it is manageable. Like I said, they got Alabama at home.
Yeah, that's considered manageable.
I think the Egg Bowl at home.
Yeah, they've got. I'm trying to think who their other game is. They must still play Texas A&M. I think it goes Alabama, Texas A&M, and Mississippi State.
Yeah, because I think Texas A&M is usually their second to last game before the Egg Bowl. Yeah. And like I said, I think what is it? I don't have it up. I know they play Alabama and Oxford. I thought the Egg Bowl's in Oxford too, and I think they go to College Station for A&M.
No. That's right. They beat Texas A&M 2 weeks ago, so their second to last game of the season must be
Arkansas.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
They beat Texas A&M 31-28. Yep.
Yeah, Arkansas looks like a pretty easy win. But I was preseason. I was saying that Arkansas is one of those teams that a lot of people were high on early on, and I'm like, there's no way this team is going to be even better than, I'd say, 8-4 at best at the end of the season. But there were a lot of people. It was like last year. Remember, last year they opened up the season with two big wins against both the Texas teams, and then they kind of fell down from earth there.
Well, I don't know how much they fell. They went 9-4, finished in the top 15 in the country.
Yeah, they were. A lot of people were talking about them as playoff material. I don't see how.
Yeah, I don't know who those people were, but
it's probably the same people that thought Alabama was going to drop down last year as well.
Okay, Mike. Anything else?
Nope. Pass the torch.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got Kovarks on the line.
Hey there, Mark. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What's on your mind?
I got a few things I want to talk about. Just there's some things with this poll this week that I'm not too big of a fan of. So I wanted to get another opinion to see if I'm like.
Okay. First of all, just to correct you, it's not a poll. Nobody's taking a poll.
It's true. It's
Okay.
true. It's the rankings. Right. I use them interchangeably, so
That's
but
fine.
that's not accurate, so I'm sorry about that. So why is Clemson 5 spots ahead of North Carolina when they have the same loss, but North Carolina played Notre Dame much closer, and they both play in the ACC and have had pretty similar schedules up to this point?
North Carolina played Notre Dame closer?
Yes, they only lost by 13.
Okay. Did you watch any of the game?
I did, but I know at the end they made a really good comeback, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it was a pretty meaningless comeback. Like
Oh,
they got
okay.
blasted. So anyway, I would say I would agree with you that Notre Dame's win against Clemson was more decisive, more dominant
Yeah.
than their win against North Carolina. But they beat North Carolina comfortably as well.
Okay.
And they
Well,
also beat them on the road. North Carolina was playing at home. Clemson had to play on the road. But I think regardless, that's not the distinction made here. It's more about Clemson playing in a much better division where they have had to play and defeat Wake Forest, NC State, Florida State, Syracuse. So they've played 4 teams that have all been ranked at one point in the season, and 2 of them are currently ranked. So they're all top 40, top 30 teams in the country versus North Carolina. Other than the Notre Dame game, their best win is against nobody. Like their 8 wins are against Appalachian State and Florida A&M outside the conference. Let's see. They beat Pitt,
so
Virginia.
I'm sorry. I thought they had played Wake
Georgia.
Forest and NC State already. Or I thought they had played Wake Forest already.
Oh, they got Wake Forest this Saturday.
Next week, yeah. So that's my
Yeah.
Okay, so
And then they'll play NC State at the end. Yep.
yeah. Okay, so I guess that makes more sense. But
So that'll be a good comparison once we get to that point. Okay, North Carolina and Clemson versus Wake and versus NC State.
Yeah.
And Georgia Tech. They played them as well.
Yeah. All right, well that's fair. So what about see, I really don't like having UCF ranked but not having Liberty ranked. So Liberty has a better record. Their only loss was by
I'm sorry, sir. Back up one second. They have a better record than who? Liberty?
UCF.
Okay, 8-1, 7-2. Okay, go ahead.
Liberty, their only loss was to Wake Forest by 1 point, who is a top 30 team. UCF got crushed by ECU. So why? And then Liberty's got a win over Arkansas.
All right. So when we look at UCF, they lost by a touchdown to Louisville, who's getting better and better and better, but still not a great loss. But Louisville's a top 40, 45 team. UCF beat Georgia Tech by 17. They beat SMU by 22. They beat Cincinnati by 4. They beat Memphis by a touchdown. What is Memphis now? Memphis is 4-5, so forget that. All right, so you got yourself a good point there. Compare that to Liberty's. So their top end of their schedule, to your point, is better and more impressive, their results, than UCF's.
Yeah.
On the other hand, their schedule is pretty awful.
Yeah.
Let's pull it here.
Well, I can't believe. So, I mean, truth be told, I've only been paying attention to Liberty past couple of weeks with the BYU and Arkansas game. I didn't realize they almost lost to Gardner-Webb.
Yes, they beat Gardner-Webb by 1 point. The BYU game in any other year would be a pretty impressive win by 27 points, but BYU has just fallen off the map. Arkansas is not a good SEC team, but they're an SEC team that's beaten the likes of, if we want to bring it full circle, Cincinnati, in South Carolina, teams like that, Auburn, Old Dominion by 2 touchdowns. They beat Akron. I don't know how a team in the top 25 can only beat Akron by 9 points. Akron is an awful team. Beat Southern Miss by 2. Beat UAB by a touchdown. That's a interesting comparison you've got going there between those two.
Yeah. So, like, honestly, what I'd compare most though is UCF's best win is Cincinnati, Liberty's best win is probably Arkansas. But if you put those against each other, who's got the head-to-head?
Yep. Arkansas beat Cincinnati.
So
Yep.
I don't get how you could rank UCF all the way up at, like, what was it, 22? But not
Yes.
even have Liberty mentioned. I just...
Well,
I
who
get
knows? They
that-
might be 26. We don't know.
True. But obviously there's not 26 spots on that board. So, and then one last thing that I wanted to bring up, and this
Sure.
is a pretty crazy scenario. Like, I don't think this is going to happen, but
Yep.
it's kind of a fun what if. Also, in a way, a bit of a scary what if. So let's imagine if Ole Miss wins out and goes 11-1.
Yeah.
Let's say LSU wins out and goes 11-2,
Okay.
and they win the SEC.
Yep.
Georgia wins out except for the SEC championship game and is 12-1.
Yes.
Tennessee wins out and is 11-1.
So did you catch the last caller?
I did not. I've been
I
bouncing.
laid out the exact same scenario
Oh,
because they were talking about crazy scenarios, and I said, take this one in, and I laid that out. 4 teams from the SEC would all have deserving, valid consideration for the playoff. I'm not saying that they should be selected, but any of them being left out can throw up their hands and say, look at our resume.
yeah.
Yep.
That's fair.
Everyone's looking at these other scenarios in the SEC, and we're forgetting about Ole Miss. Now, is that likely to happen? No, but it's possible.
Well, and just imagine, let's say, I mean, Maryland is a decent team. They're not great, but they're, I'd say, decent. They have Ohio State at home, and that's right before the Michigan game.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a trap game. So what if Ohio State were to lose that, but then turn around and beat Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe get upset by Illinois or something? Like, that could happen.
Well, then the Big Ten's out.
Yeah, exactly. And Clemson wouldn't get in over a one-loss SEC team. TCU, they could easily lose to Texas this weekend.
Yeah, they could lose twice
Yeah.
at the end of this.
So, honestly, really, it's not that unlikely. Each individual thing in that scenario is not unlikely, I don't think. What I think is unlikely is all of it happening together. But
Sure. And there could be a 2-loss team playing the Pac-12 championship game and win, and we could have a 2-loss Pac-12 champion.
yeah,
Throw all that together. I don't know how the committee doesn't select 4 teams from the SEC to go to the play. I don't know how you get around that.
exactly. So,
Wouldn't that be something?
well, and I mean, how would they even rank that with those 4? Like,
How would they rank them?
who would be number 1, 2, 3, 4? Like, if those were their records, because LSU got crushed by Tennessee, who got crushed by Georgia, but then Georgia and LSU, the head-to-head, went to LSU.
Yeah, let's not go through that right now.
Yeah, that may be a bit too much.
You have to go with the best resume and just kind of add it up, and it would be minuscule. All right, Colvarks, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
And, yeah, all right.
All right, let's turn this whole thing over to the guys that basically run this channel at this point anyway. You got Tim, you got Tony, you got Rick. Guys, pop on in here at any time and unveil the latest from the Voice of College Football rankings, and we will clear the deck to bring you guys in. Hey, Rick.
Hey, good evening, Mark.
Tim, how you doing?
Hey, good, Mark. I'm riveted. I want to come back next week when we hear that the SEC found a scenario to get in 5 teams in the playoffs. So we had 3 the week before. Now we got 4. I can't wait till next week.
Did you hear that scenario, though? Did you hear that scenario?
Let's not be jealous, Tim. Come on.
No, Mark, I was too busy vomiting from the nonsense.
That is insane. But anyway,
Insane, but it's possible.
By the way, if the real MVP is in the audience, he might want to call in because we do have the special perspective inside the mind of the real MVP. So
yes, he may be displaced by our last caller. The real MVP's SEC
love, affection,
his paranoia, his obsession, maybe have been surpassed by the caller that proposed a 4-team playoff.
It could be. It could be. Well, we have the votes from your community. So as you guys know, every week, as LBC has organized the 12-pack Patreon playoff prediction poll. And what that is everybody in Mark's Patreon community is welcome to participate, and they send in a ballot and we tally them up. And so there's people there from the ACC, Big 12, Pac-12, and SEC. So all 5 conferences plus some independents are involved, fans of all those different folks. And then they submit their top 25 ballots, and we put it together to see what you guys in the Voice of College Football community think would actually be the playoffs if they were held today. So, and we want to compare them to what the actual folks have done. And the funny thing is, LBC came up with this idea, and now all of the media people do it on Twitter all the time. So this is an LBC original idea. He's got everybody else beat. So
hang on there, Tony, because really this is Mark's creation, because he developed the Discord on Patreon, and that's where all the knuckleheads started talking, and that inspired me to come up with an idea. And so this is really, if it wasn't for Mark and this platform, this wouldn't have happened. So this is Mark's baby. These are the guys in your Patreon community that have taken action, and we're ahead of the curve because we're on the voice of college football, Mark, and we just deal with the facts. We deal with the facts, and this is a reflection of the community. If you don't like it, like the first iteration that came out on October 5th, we were lambasted as Pac-12 homers. How are you coming up with this thing? It's like, you know what? If you want to complain,
we don't come up with it.
And join the knuckleheads. You know, don't today on election day, don't just complain about it. Cast your ballot, god darn it. Pay the $5 and join the community. If you want to complain, go ahead, because nobody's going to listen to you on the chat there. But that's you. If you want to be a wallflower, continue to be a wallflower. If you want to make your vote matter, step on up. We'd love to have you.
Well, we've got your vote, so let's see what you guys had to say. And I thought it was pretty impressive. Let's see. So you guys put in first place the Georgia Bulldogs, who would be remember the highest 4 conference champions host a big bowl game and get a bye, and then everyone else filters in with the next highest. Who are not conference champions or not the highest 4 conference champions hosting a game at home. So second, the Michigan Wolverines displaced Ohio State in your community's voting. Next up, Ohio State. But because this community did not vote Ohio State as the prospective champions, Ohio State is instead going to that very envious number 5 spot where they'll host a playoff game in Columbus. Next up, Tennessee hosting a game in Knoxville. Once again, those 2 byes are still empty because Ohio State and Tennessee not projected as conference champions. Then the Oregon Ducks hosting the Cotton Bowl with a bye, and TCU at getting that 4th seed as the prospective Big 12 champions. Moving on, you guys put USC to host a home game in LA. And you put LSU to host a home game in Baton Rouge. So, who are these teams going to play in your voting that you guys put together? Well, LSU is going to play UCLA in a rematch of the game where UCLA won last year. USC is going to play Alabama in the Coliseum. 1978 comes back to life. Tennessee is going to play the ACC champions Clemson, who's in that 11 seed. You guys pummeled Clemson after their loss. And finally, or actually before we get there, next out, The two bubble teams that you guys said were the next. Now remember, they're higher ranked than actually, I think, than Clemson or your number 12 seed, but because the top 6 conference champions get in, Clemson and Utah did not get the votes. And they instead went to Tulane. So Tulane comes in at number 12. So that's the bracket. Any thoughts real quick? And then we'll take a look at how the actual voting came out.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, USC and Alabama signed me up for that game anytime they can get together. Much to Tim's point, throughout the season, yes, I would love to see that game in about 2 years in particular. But even right now, would love to see those two get together. LSU and UCLA, I think, would be a tremendous matchup. Very close game. I'd be intrigued. I'm all in on that one. Ohio State, Tulane, of course, has route written all over it, we think. But I think the most difficult bracket looks like, to me, would be the upper right USC, Alabama, Michigan bracket, I believe.
I fear that our Trojan defense would not fare well in that bracket. There's some holes.
This time it's swapped from Tuscaloosa to Los Angeles, but even that's not going to help, probably.
No, that unless we get some of their linebackers in the process, it won't help.
Well, Alabama has some flaws. They don't really have the receivers they used to have. They have one running back, and they're not as formidable, especially on the road. This would be a road game. I think, Tony, you mentioned 78. That's when SC was down in Birmingham. But last time
that's yeah, I forget which year we were there.
Was 77. So that would be great. And hey, winner gets to stay in LA and then play Michigan in the Rose Bowl, and that's a treat. I like the LSU UCLA rematch down in Baton Rouge. That's a heck of a game. And then Columbus with Ohio State hosting Tulane. Maybe the Buckeyes donors enclose the stadium with a temporary dome, so there's not any wind issues. And CJ Stroud.
We wouldn't want Ohio State to get wet.
That's right.
Ohio State presented by the Wicked Witch of the West.
Mark, I love you. I just have
teasing, Mark. We're just teasing.
A little smack there, Mark. Because we don't want weather to be an issue. That's supposed to be the California team indoors coming to the Big Ten, not for the Big Ten teams playing in the Midwest. You know what I love to see though is Tennessee Clemson. That is a game because Clemson has never ever played Oregon. So we get the little towns of Clemson and Eugene matching up at Autzen, a possibility. That'd be great. So it's like the Orange Bowl, the best orange team gets to go to Autzen.
I like it. Or actually, it's in Dallas.
I'm sorry. That's right.
Jerry World.
There you go.
They get Oregon and Jerry World. All right. So we take a look at the votes.
Let's do it.
See how you guys did. So you guys, now this is actually looking at 1 through 12. So this is not doing the playoff seeding, which has its specialties. Now number 12, you guys had a little disagreement. You guys put Utah in there. Number 11, there was unanimous Ole Miss across the board. You guys did really well, really consistently. 10, the Voice College football community, they hit Alabama worse, and it looks like the playoff hit Clemson worse. The community, Mark, your community valued UCLA a little higher. They put them at 9, Alabama versus Alabama. Your community put LSU 8, then USC. So those two were flipped. Now, Mark, your community, they do not believe TCU is going to, they still think TCU are Make-A-Wish kids. So they've got TCU at 6, Oregon at 5. Your community put Tennessee 4, Ohio State 3, Michigan 2, and everybody knows after this week that Georgia's number 1.
Okay.
So I think your community votes. I don't see anything really outrageous here. You guys punished Clemson for losing to a team that lost to Stanford. That does, we think, maybe make Stanford the ACC champion since Notre Dame has whipped Clemson, whipped North Carolina, and whipped Syracuse. So your community does not respect the ACC this year, Mark.
I'm very surprised that Clemson only dropped 6. The other knuckleheads that are on on ESPN dropped them 6 spots, as you pointed out, Tony, to a Notre Dame team that lost to
Stanford and Marshall at home.
And Stanford is arguably the 11th best Pac-12 team. And we know what everybody in college football thinks of the Pac-12. I think Chris brought it out that his format, the way he comes up with these conference rankings, he doesn't know if they're right, but he comes up with these conference rankings, doesn't disclose the formula. But he has the Pac-12 as 5th, which I find kind of surprising. But I can understand that because a lot of people don't see the Pac-12. Because
to answer Ferris's comment, just real quick, Rick, not to interrupt, guys, there's actually fewer Pac-12 voters than most other conferences. So there's not. I think we're the only 3.
So falling 6 spots is a little bit troubling. That is a bad loss because the way they lost, and Notre Dame was 5-3, they're 6-3, they were unranked. Goes to show it's tough to win on the road.
And
It
Ferris,
is.
I don't know if you noticed it, but the knuckleheads are voting. Have you guys 2, not 3? So I don't know why Ferris is ringing in unless he thought they were number 1. But
Yeah. They were a little kinder to Michigan.
Mark,
Now, guys,
where would Mark have Clemson? Mark, where would you put Clemson?
I've got Clemson 11.
Okay, so split the difference.
I've got them at 11 because I'm also looking at, I'm not going to overreact to one game. And I do think that their wins are fairly substantial. They're not impressive in the way they won the games, but I think Syracuse, Florida State, NC State, and Wake is a collection of decent wins, not great wins, decent wins. And the Notre Dame performance was atrocious.
See, what I don't get is, looking at the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings, Ole Miss had a bye. They didn't play. They have, I believe, 1 top 25 ranked win in Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. And UCLA has 2 now. Washington's ranked in this week's college football playoff rankings. I believe they were 25, and they beat number 13 Utah. And their loss was to a number 6 Oregon. So how UCLA doesn't go ahead of Ole Miss, that's a little bit questionable. I don't understand that. With 2 quality wins.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So
Now, if you're trying to insert logic, do we want to delve into the mind of the real MVP?
sure.
He's here on the line. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're welcoming in DeReal MVP. DeReal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony, Tim, LBC Trojan, Mark.
Well, DeReal, we wanted to know how you think about playoffs. So we got together Ouija boards, voodoo dolls. We went to some witches. We called up Miss Cleo. We did everything we could to try to figure out how would DeReal look at the playoffs. And first of all, I think we should start with a fallacy. There's people who have the wrong idea. Most people think that this is how DeReal would stock the playoffs. That it would be an all SEC playoff, adding, of course, Texas and Oklahoma, and that, just the bubble teams would be Sewanee and Vandy.
Well,
But
Tim, in this bracket, Tony, in this bracket, Kentucky's got to be number 1.
Well, they are 7 because you have a little bit of sanity. This is only your slightly peyote fever pitch dream.
Fair enough.
But you got a nice good win at home over Oklahoma, and then you got a chance to beat Tennessee in the Rose Bowl. So this is what people might wrongly think is your bracket, but DeReal, we have more faith in you.
I talk to DeReal MVP all the time, and I think this is truly unfair. I think he would clearly have only 11 of the top 12 teams coming from the SEC.
Well, he does have Tulane because they're a former SEC.
I think that he would squeeze the Ohio State-Michigan winner into the playoff.
Well, here, let me show you once we got the Ouija board together with Miss Cleo, we got a better answer. And I'll show you, this is what we figured out was the real inside the mind of DeReal MVP. And here's what he decided. He has Georgia number 1. We think he has. Now, remember, he respects the process. And respecting the process means you got to have the other conferences in there. But you stack them so the SEC can win. So we think he has Michigan number 2, USC number 3, Tulane number 12, Texas number 4, Clemson number 11, Notre Dame number 10, and Ohio State number 9. Now, why are these engineered this way? To showcase the glory that is that sacred body of the Southeastern Conference, because he's going to have Ole Miss against Ohio State. He's going to have Notre Dame against Alabama in Tuscaloosa. He's going to make Clemson go to Knoxville for a Big Orange showdown. And he's going to make Tulane stay home for play in Baton Rouge. That, by the way, super fun game. And what does he think is going to happen? Well, first of all, 2 teams are not making it. Oregon, because they got a beat down from the SEC, and so they're just there to rub their nose in it a little more. And Kentucky, because he doesn't actually want Kentucky to play any of these teams. So Kentucky instead is just like slightly denied. And what would we have then? Well, clearly he would want Ole Miss to win that one. He would think that LSU would beat Tulane. Actually, that's true. He would think that Alabama would make just waste of Notre Dame. Tennessee would whip Clemson. And then we'd see Georgia winning that bracket. LSU winning their bracket. Alabama beating Michigan. And Tennessee beating USC, giving us, which that probably would happen, and that would give us a perfect 4-team SEC bracket from which Georgia can celebrate the glory amongst the SEC. Darrell, how close were we?
I'm not going to lie. You're pretty close.
We're pretty close. There we
You're
go.
pretty close.
See, I knew you would respect the process.
Right. Based on this scenario, okay, which I will admit is unlikely.
Oh, and by the way, Ohio State is number 9, just to tick off all the bucknuts in the chat.
Yeah. Notre Dame, I don't think I would have Notre Dame at 10. I think you should have, just for the heck of it, put Marshall there just because they own Notre Dame.
Oh, that's a good thing. That's a good zing. I like that. See, I thought you might want Notre Dame just for the glory of being able to say that the SEC has smited each of the other conferences and Notre Dame.
Yeah, but I mean, they're Notre Dame. I mean, if Marshall and Stanford can smite them, is it really worth bragging about?
Oh, zing. I like this, Darrell. I like it. Yeah. All right, you're right. That should be Marshall.
But outside of that, if you just look at the games in this bracket, other than Ohio State and Ole Miss, okay, is there a game anybody would object to being the way it currently is shaped out?
Do you see why we engineered it this way, Darrell? We knew we could get in your mind. We knew we could get in there.
Probably got some Michigan fans upset, but I've seen Alabama and Nick Saban do so much in my lifetime. I'm not picking against Alabama and Nick Saban. I'm sorry.
I probably wouldn't either. It's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I like that Tennessee Southern Cal game. That'd be a fun one.
Tennessee would. How much would they score on them? 63.
Well, the over/under would be 245
on Tennessee's defense.
Yeah. The over-under in that game is 245, and it's in Jerry World.
I think currently I would have TCU as the slight favorite over USC, but I just need to see how USC looks against UCLA and Oregon if they were to meet in the Pac-12 title.
Well, and there's no TCU because you have a chance to get a real SEC team as the Big 12. So that's why you took Texas.
Oh, yeah. I figured that was the case.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you heard my call last night, Tony, but I said how poetic would it be if a future SEC team knocks out the Big 12 and all 12 in all likelihood from the college football playoff?
Oh, I think it's going to happen just by reality.
Yeah, I know. Vegas has it as a 7-point favorite for a reason.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably still bet on Texas, even with the points. Oh, anyway, Darrell, hey, we love you. We love to tease you, but we do love you, and we know that you respect the process, and it's always fun when you call. So we figured we'd give you the bracket of your dreams.
Well, thank you, Tony. I appreciate it, and you all do a great job on the USC post-game show, and are great callers and just great guys all around. So it's great having you in this community.
You too. Hey, keep it up, Darrell. We love you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
So anyway, we thought we'd have a little fun with that, but this was the real bracket that you guys voted on here again, and I think there's some good games.
That would be Nick Saban's first time coaching a team at the Coliseum. That would be huge. Never coached a game at the Coliseum. Kind of like Bear Bryant. Got my Bear Bryant hat on tonight because I never thought I'd see a day in 1 year with Lincoln Riley that we're ranked above Alabama in the college football playoff. So I didn't get dressed for the occasion. My Alabama friends out there love you, but going from 4-8 to above Alabama, hey, I'll take that any day of the week. My season is set. I have realistic expectations.
The BCS screwed it up because Saban should have played USC. The BCS messed that up when he was at LSU. That would have been a great game. Pete Carroll versus Nick Saban, and that would have been good. There, this would put that to rest, that injustice, because it would be great. And again, with Nick Saban, like in a meaningful way, not playing like a Helton, team, somewhere in Jerry's world, a real meaningful game, a home and away game, even though it's a playoff game. It would have been amazing to see this kind of a matchup back then. But this would make up for it, and with a team that's not led by Helton. So
it would be perfect symmetry. The Bear coached the Coliseum, and so did Nick Saban. I think the Pope was there, a couple of Olympics. Hey, you got to send out Saban the right way. Come to the Collie.
I like it.
And that's what you're going to have with a 12-team playoff by expanding it. And I know there's going to be, a certain opinion that doesn't like it, but you're going to get to have these matchups, right? Because what may happen in college football that you're hearing now is, well, if Oregon would have scheduled Portland State, they would be one of the top 4 teams right now. So you might have these teams that decide, you know what, we're not going to go ahead and challenge ourselves in the out of conference. We're just going to go ahead and play G5s and maybe a lower level Power 5 team, so we can make it through unscathed. But you get to the playoff, and this is mandated. This is what it's about.
And real quick, just to reiterate something, we've got Apocalypse South says, "Lol, y'all put Oregon and TCU ahead of Ohio." No, guys, this is the process. The process says the top 4 conference champions take the 4 top seeds. So the voters the voters here think that Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. So Ohio State, even though they're number 3 overall, they are the 5 seed. And this is actually one of the interesting things with the system that the playoff expansion has adopted, is that you're going to see that number 5 seed is usually going to be overweighted. And that number 4 seed, which is just the 4th best conference champion, is almost always going to be lower ranked than the number 5 seed in the actual polls. So you take a look at what was the actual poll. Wrong window. The actual poll here had Ohio State 3 and TCU 6. So guys, this is the process, and you're going to have to get used to it.
Well,
this is what they're going to do.
We've had a couple drive-bys that did not understand that. I've seen a few other people comment, "Oh, they've got Oregon at number 3. I'm out of here," thinking that that's where they are ranked, not understanding that this is the future process.
And so that's one of the changes that they're making with this 12-team playoff, is what you're seeing right now, where there might not be a value on being a conference champion with the way the 4-team playoff sets up. When you expand to 12, they are putting a value on winning your conference. So the 4 highest rated conference champions will get a bye. They don't necessarily have to be the 4 highest ranked teams. And that's the difference between the 4-team playoff model and the 12-team playoff model.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Well, thank you, Mark. We appreciate it. This was fun. And everybody, guys, if you haven't joined Mark's Patreon community, we'd love to have you, and we'd love to have you help vote.
Tim, Tony, Rick, thank you so much for all that you do. This is an amazing thing that you guys have embarked on here. Rick's idea, I believe it originated with him in regards to putting this together about the playoff bracket, and taking 2022 and jettisoning us forward is phenomenal. And of course, what you guys do on Wednesday night with the Pac-12 show and USC post game is amazing.
You know what? Tony brings it to life. These graphics are phenomenal.
Yes.
Tony sends out the ballots, organizes them.
I
You're-
just do it in PowerPoint. It's easy.
You're amazing, Tony. So
Thank you. You guys are the best. Thank you. And thank you. But thank you to everybody in the whole community. It's because of you guys that it makes it fun. And that's where we get all the stuff from.
thanks, Mark.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mark.
You guys are phenomenal. Thanks for stopping by as always and giving us a slice from the Voice of College Football community on Patreon. And we will take our last two calls of the night. We got Buckeye Mike here and want to remind everyone that you can join us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. You sign up there and you can join those guys and a whole lot of other folks in our community and talk college football on a regular basis. Buckeye Mike, you're wearing a USC shirt.
A Cotton Bowl.
Oh, okay.
Shirt.
I got you. All right. That makes more sense. Okay.
So that was interesting.
They had the idea to take the current situation in college football, move it forward to what the 12-team playoff limitations and format is, and see how it would play out then.
So after seeing the rankings, I kind of feel like I'm crazy putting like Bama and Clemson where I did.
And you've got Bama and Clemson where?
Bama 11, Clemson 12.
And they have Bama at 9, correct?
Yes. I feel like nothing against DeReal or any of the SEC fans here, but that makes me feel a little bit of the SEC bias coming back into play.
Well, then you shouldn't feel like you're crazy.
I don't know. It's contradicting because I feel crazy because of the way that played out. But at the same time, I'm like, you said I shouldn't, because you even agreed that makes sense that they should be right around there.
Yeah. Again, depending on what you value in rankings, I think there are different ways to do it.
So did you see the report about Scott Frost potentially being the next coach at USF?
I did not. Since they got their brains beat out by UCF a few times when he was the head coach, that wouldn't surprise me.
Me either, honestly. It actually got me to thinking, do you think Scott Frost is kind of like Luke Fickell in the sense of he was at UCF. He did really good at UCF. He went to Nebraska and crapped the bed. Where, yes, Luke Fickell wasn't given a fair chance and opportunity as the head coach at Ohio State. So, like everybody said before, we don't hold it against him. But he didn't do very well for obviously 1 year. Then he goes to Cincinnati and completely changes the culture. I guess my point of the question is, do you feel like, I kind of feel like they're both smaller program coaches, like a smaller program is the proper fit for them?
Well, you say that about Scott Frost based on experience, based on the sample size that we see.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you say that about Luke Fickell.
Right, because there's not really, I mean, there's the 1 year at Ohio State, but
yeah,
we shouldn't really hold that against them.
Yeah, that was not his program.
Right. I mean, I guess time will tell, because even though it'll still be Cincinnati, they do go to the Big 12 in a few years. So, I mean, maybe time will tell. I don't know.
Yeah, depending on whether Cincinnati really has the chops as a program to succeed at that level, with or without Luke Fickell.
Right. I just wanted to because I was in the chat before I called in probably about an hour or so ago. I just want everybody that's still in the chat to know Ohio State is not the only fan base where the fans are crazy, and I know that from experience because I worked for the parking company for the OSU football games last year. I heard of incidences in Michigan where Michigan fans were destroying OSU fans' vehicles and everything else. And that's why I always say, and I feel rightfully so, that Michigan doesn't beat us enough to where the fans know how to handle a win against Ohio State. And the other thing that I really noticed was after we barely beat Penn State last year, I watched a couple of Penn State guys pick up a trash can by the shot and try to chuck it into a crowd of OSU fans. So we're not the only crazy fans. We can be crazy and kind of stupid sometimes after we win the national championship and light couches on fire and stuff, but we're not the only ones.
Yeah, it would be nice if people really thought about all of this and came to the result that we root for who we root for based on where we were born, where we were raised, who influenced us, and that's the only difference.
Yeah. I know sometimes it can be different in certain cases. I know some older people that, started as an Ohio State fan, but they're so old to the point that Woody was the reason they were Ohio State. But then the reason they flip-flop doesn't make sense to me because they were like, oh, well, Bo is at Michigan and Woody's not at Ohio State anymore. So I guess I'm going to root for Michigan for the rest of my life.
I've not heard that one.
So what do you, I know we're probably talking like 5 or so. I mean, I hope that it's longer because I don't know if you saw Ohio State's future non-con head-to-heads. Between next year and I think 31, we have head-to-heads with Georgia home and home, Bama home and home, Boston College, Oregon again, and Texas again.
In Washington.
Oh, yep, that's right. Who do you think replaces Saban, and how much longer do you think he has?
Oh, wow. So he just turned 70.
I've always thought that depending on who replaces Saban, give it about 4, maybe one full cycle, so 4 or 5 years after he goes. And now nobody knows for sure, but I always thought one full cycle and Bama's probably back to the time period between Bear and Saban, where it's 6, 7, maybe 8 wins.
I think you're selling them short a bit on what they did between the Bear and Saban.
Granted, I was born in 96, so
you may want to look at the win totals. There were a few of those, but it was a higher winning percentage than that. And they did win a national championship in 1992.
That's right. Miami.
But anyway, I think Saban's going to coach as long as he's healthy. I think he's being brutally honest that he says, this is what I enjoy doing. I don't know what else to do. I would be bored and wouldn't have any purpose if I wasn't coaching. So I just think he's going to continue to coach until he doesn't feel it, until he doesn't want to get up in the morning to go coach because of maybe some physical ailments. And I think actually the onset of any physical ailments to start. He's going to combat them by coaching and thinking, I'm going to combat losing my health by staying active and keeping my mind sharp. So I think he's going to coach for a long time. I don't know what that means. It's probably 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And then after that, my goodness, the world of college football is going to look so much different 5 or 6 years from now than it does now. But, 5 or 6 years ago, if you're going 6 years ago, Kirby Smart didn't have a head coaching job. Urban Meyer was the coach at Ohio State and looked like he was bearing down on Nick Saban for national championships. And you could make all sorts of claims about college football at that point. So Dabo Swinney's the interesting one there, because I don't know if he would want to take on that challenge. I don't know why he would. Why would you want to follow? He's going to be a legend in his own right, but not to the degree of Saban unless he really kicks it in. And so why would you want to follow Saban and have to live up to that?
That's what I'm trying to rattle in my head. And it's funny you mentioned Dabo because in one of my videos last week, I even said, I don't know who would, but I would put my money on Dabo. Granted, Dabo and Scott Frost are two different people. They're two different styles of coaching. But Scott Frost graduated from Nebraska. It didn't work. So why would another team turn around and get a coach that graduated from their school?
Yeah. So that's a point, but is that the reason it didn't work for Scott Frost? Because he played there. It just seems to be so separate from the actual issues and job that he had, that he happened to play there.
Mm-hmm.
Dabo Swinney, if he's concerned about his legacy, he could also look at it as though when you win at one place, there's a certain cachet to that legacy that you never went anywhere else. You were always the Clemson head coach, and people are going to remember Dabo Swinney, Clemson. From the standpoint of people evaluating how good you are at what you do, there's something to be said for like a Nick Saban and Urban Meyer come to mind in particular as being guys that wherever they went, they won, especially Urban Meyer. So there's one cachet to always being a legendary coach at one school, Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden, and I know Bowden was at West Virginia, but building your legacy only at one place versus there's also cachet to being like, oh, wow, that guy proved that he didn't have the perfect situation or it wasn't just the right fit there, but he could go anywhere and win. And maybe Dabo Swinney would want to take on the Alabama legacy and win championships at two different places. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough to say. So I think I did it again. As far as I can think of, I need to start writing my questions down for you. As far as I can think of, I think that's just about it.
Okay.
So,
all right, Buckeye Mike. Appreciate you stopping by.
No problem. Everybody have a good one and go Bucks.
All right. We got Jackson Johnson.
What's up, Mark?
What is going on tonight?
Nothing much. Just I just have a question about Alabama and Clemson being ahead of UCLA. That's one question I got. Is UCLA gonna have to just really win out to prove that, hey, we're as good as these guys? Why do you have Bama and Clemson ahead of us? They're basically out of it.
Well, why is Clemson out of it and UCLA not?
Well, UCLA lost to Oregon, but Clemson got beat down by Notre Dame. So, and, UCLA, all they'll have to do is beat USC, right? They got to win their other games, of course, like Arizona, California, which are pretty easy. If they treat Arizona and California like USC, right? And whoever they play, like, say, Oregon in a rematch or a Utah in a rematch, it would be more likely Oregon. And they beat Oregon in the rematch. They got themselves a pretty good, standing, so to speak.
Yeah.
Say, hey, we should be in, and TCU being fourth in the nation, which I say bravo to the committee. So, but do you think they did it because they like what TCU did, or do you think they wanted to show people, oh, see, we're not biased for the SEC. We're not biased.
Well, if Tennessee would have played Georgia close, then there's no way that they would have moved them down that extra spot. I think that was their deciding factor, that the loser of the Georgia-Tennessee game would drop to 4 because they wanted to continue to honor Ohio State and Michigan as undefeated teams. So the loser of that game would go to 4 if it was a decent game, but if one team was dominant, then that losing team would drop as long as TCU won, because TCU's victory was not impressive.
It was sloppy.
I wouldn't have raised TCU from 7 to 4 and dropped Tennessee to 5 behind them. So I have no issue with TCU being ranked ahead of Tennessee, but I have an issue with it based on where they were ranked last week.
Yes.
Texas Tech, if anybody was watching this game, they were up 17-13 with about 11 minutes left in the game.
Right.
And Texas Tech stopped TCU with a third down sack. And one of the best defensive linemen, his last name's Wilson, in the Big 12, had the sack on Max Duggan. And they mistakenly called him for a face mask when he had the shoulder and he turned Duggan down. And why they didn't replay it and review that call, I have no idea. So they stopped. And I'm not saying they would have won the game, but you're up 17-13. There's 11 minutes left in the game. You stopped TCU deep in their own territory, like at the 10-yard line. You're about to get a punt with a 4-point lead with 10 minutes left to about midfield. And instead, TCU gets a gift first down and they go ahead and score and take the lead and never look back.
Yeah.
It was that close.
Well, Saturday, they're really they got to show the committee a lot, that's for sure, because they're going to Austin, Texas. Funny thing about Texas is they don't bring their A game against somebody like a Texas Tech, for example. But they brought their A game against an Alabama and an Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling they're going to do the exact same thing against TCU. So it's TCU play without best wide receiver in college, and they're starting left tackle.
I think that would be their best wide receiver. I don't know that Tay Barber is the best wide receiver, and they're starting left tackle. So fair point there. Texas Tech played without their starting quarterback, so we can counter that.
Oh yeah.
Donovan Smith did not play, and Texas Tech's second and third string quarterbacks were not that good in that game. Back to your point, where were we on? Oh, the Texas game.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Texas shows up and plays all out. They're at home, and they showed up big for the Alabama game. They showed up big for the Oklahoma game, and they won this last game against Kansas State. I think they're going to be really tough to handle.
Oh, yeah. But and here's another one. Oregon being sixth in the nation. Now, it looks to me they got a real tough stretch to end the season, right? Because they got Washington coming home, right?
Yeah.
And then next Saturday, the big one against Utah, revenge game. And then you got the Civil War, or I like to call it the Gravity Falls Bowl, between Oregon and Oregon State. And they got to go to Corvallis. That's going to be a very, very ugly night or day for Oregon, basically. But they get through those games, and then they get through whoever it is, USC or UCLA. Win those games, you got yourself in for a little bit. But that one thing that's still against them is that 49-3 beat down by Georgia in the Chick-fil-A kickoff.
Yeah, we can't get around that. It can be explained away, and I agree with the explanations because I've made them myself. Dan Lanning was not just the first game coach at Oregon, a first time ever college football head coach, and putting together a staff and being ready for that good of a team pretty much on the road. Yeah, it's a tall order that he walked into. But the result trumps everything. We can have all sorts of theories and considerations of why Oregon got their rear ends handed to them. Like that's the kind of score that Georgia puts on the Citadel.
Yeah. But yeah, it's and how about with Bama LSU, right? You know, Bama looked very undisciplined on Saturday. Matter of fact, they look very undisciplined this year. And, you know, losing Scott Cochran has hurt them badly. Would you like to hear the stats from 2021, 2022?
Absolutely.
Scott Cochran. Okay, so 2021, they were 99th in penalties per game for the whole year. Tied 99th. And this year, they are 129th in penalties per game. Now, you add those two, it's 228, and then you divide it by 2, and it equals 114 in penalties per game. That is the average without Scott Cochran. Bad look right there. And, you know, Bill O'Brien, I'm thinking is going to be going at some point, and I suspect that Bama is going to get a new offensive coordinator. And as for LSU, it looks to me, though, they're going to have to really, well, they got to clinch the West Division against Arkansas on Saturday, right? Then they got I forget the cupcake game they're going to play next Saturday. Oh, right, UAB, right. They're going to play UAB next Saturday. And then they're going to play the biggest disappointment in all of college football rivalry week, Texas A&M. Now, that team has gone from 6th in the nation to fighting for 6 wins. Bad look for Jimbo. But if LSU wins out, which they really should, but the tough one will be the SEC title game against Georgia. They win that game, they may have just clinched a playoff spot. Kind of similar to the 2017 Auburn team.
Sure.
Where they lost to LSU, they lost to Clemson, but they kept winning. And then the SEC title game, they lose to Georgia in the rematch, and we kind of just end all discussion of Auburn getting in. The 2022 LSU team, in a way, is kind of similar to the 2017 Auburn team in that regard. What do you think, Mark?
Well, yeah, the scenario is the same, that they have the opportunity to go as a 2-loss champion, to be the first ever. Of course, Auburn had those just 2 marquee wins. One of them was a blowout against Georgia. I think that game was like 40-16, if I remember correctly, against Georgia in Jordan-Hare Stadium in November. And of course, they beat the number 1 team in the country twice in the span of 3 weeks. really LSU's been able to do this with one monumental win. The Ole Miss win, I would not put that in the same category as the 2 wins that Auburn had, but yeah, here we are. They're playing, and then of course Georgia came within a whisker of the national championship, so that's what Auburn was facing in the championship game of the SEC, and LSU is going to be facing the same school that's going to have a similar status, be the expected best team and winner of the national championship. So that's what they're going to have to overcome. It's a lot.
That's true. Brian Kelly's done a great job this year, but now he has to prove himself in a New Year's Six Bowl. He couldn't win one at Notre Dame, but will he win a New Year's Six Bowl at LSU? Question there. And another question I have is no mention of Liberty in the college football playoff poll.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the lack of strength of schedule? Do you think if they had beaten Wake Forest and they're unbeaten right now, do you think they would be the highest ranked group of 5 team in the playoff, or would it be between Tulane and Liberty?
Well, Tulane lost to Southern Miss, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. They lost, I think, a 1-score game against Southern Miss. They beat Kansas State. That, of course, is their big win. I got to think that Liberty would have the nod over Tulane, having not lost a game. So, yeah, if they could have pulled off that 2-point conversion against Wake, they would be the interesting team to see how far they would be ranked. I would think that they'd be a top, 17 or 18 team.
Absolutely.
Somewhere in that range.
But do you think if they beat Connecticut, Virginia Tech, and then the last easy game, New Mexico State, if they're, say, 11-1 going into the first Saturday of December, do you think they'll be ranked at any point in the playoff poll?
I think they will. Should they? Well, if they're not ranked now, and if you don't believe that they should be ranked, I'm not talking about you specifically, but for anyone who doesn't believe that they should be ranked, and I think it's a valid argument on either hand because their schedule is extremely weak.
Yeah.
They beat teams like Southern Miss by 2 and Gardner-Webb by 1 and Akron by 9. I'm just trying to contemplate how a team that's one of the 25 best teams in the country beats Akron by 9 points. That if you don't believe that they are a top 25 team now, how does beating UConn and all the other teams you just mentioned, how does that equate to a top 25 ranking just because you're accumulating wins against the worst teams in the country?
Yeah. Well, I know this Virginia Tech team's not exactly my dad's Virginia Tech team.
No.
So
no, they're a bottom.
They're not from the Frank Beamer years.
They are probably one of the 5 worst Power 5 teams.
Yes.
They're right in that range.
They most certainly are. And here's a little fact for everybody that didn't know. Last Saturday when Liberty beat Arkansas, was their first win in school history against an SEC school.
In how many games? Do you know?
I honestly don't know, but let me check. Well, I don't think I have that much time to check.
Yeah, let's not go through the entire conference. But Liberty's not been playing football for that long. So, but they do schedule SEC teams. So I would guess it's probably 8 or 10 games.
Yeah. I don't see SEC teams in their future schedules anytime soon because next year they'll be going to the Conference USA. And I know that Hugh Freeze, had that contract extension a week or so ago with Liberty, that 8-year contract extension to 2030. Do you think he's still going to take a look at that Auburn job? Or do you think he's happy where he's at the moment?
I think we've seen a lot of head coaches sign extensions that didn't mean anything, that they still ran to the next best job they could find. Auburn certainly has shown us that they are willing to pay off buyouts.
Mike Leach, for example, signed a contract extension, but then 2 weeks later goes to Mississippi State.
Yeah. And Auburn has paid out 2 buyouts since 2019.
Yeah.
2 major buyouts, and they may help Hugh Freeze pay a buyout.
Yeah.
Or pay Liberty.
It was $21 million for Gus Malzahn.
Yeah.
And it was $15 million for Brian Harsin. It's in whip. So
yes, I don't know what Hugh Freeze, there is something to be said about quality of life and wanting to stay somewhere and live somewhere, and who knows if he's cleaned up his life. I don't know. I'm not the judge of that.
Yeah.
And whether he enjoys Liberty or that was just a job that he knew would be a stepping stone, and he's done a hell of a job because they're really good. And I got to think he's looking for the big job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Auburn did hire Bruce Pearl after the NCAA show cause. So if they can overlook the past transgressions, so to speak, which at some point they're probably going to, they'll be good to go.
Jackson, do you have any thoughts about this super chat question that's up here? Texas Savage number 3 says, Group of 5 question. Next Tulsa football coach. So Tulsa's right now 1-4 in the conference. They're 3-6. I guess Scotty Montgomery's going to be shown the door. When you're talking about that level of football, you're talking about getting like a top-notch coordinator, or if you're talking about getting a head coach, then you're looking at somebody who's on the way down. Like a Clay Helton lost the USC job and landed up at Georgia State, that type of situation. But if you're looking for an up-and-comer, I don't know who those people are.
Garrett
Those guys
Riley
are.
from TCU.
Pardon me?
Garrett Riley from TCU.
Okay, yeah.
That's him.
Those type of guys.
That would be one. I mean, after all, look at the job he did with Matt Duggan this year. Let's see. I know that TCU is first in total yards and offense in the Big 12. Surprisingly, they're third in the passing yards per game. Texas Tech and Oklahoma State are higher. Oklahoma State looked pretty sloppy those last 2 weeks. I believe they don't want to be in Kansas anymore. So,
all right, Jackson. Anything else for us tonight?
Well, let's see. One more thing. I hope I don't drag on too long.
You're good. If you got anything else.
Cue the SpongeBob narrator, 30 minutes later. But in all seriousness, USC, same thing with them. They got an easy game. They got Colorado.
Yeah.
But the next 2 games are going to be tough. UCLA, Notre Dame. They get through those 3 games. Like, they'll get through Colorado, but, just don't treat Colorado as if they're easy. They'll beat them. Then they got UCLA. They beat them. Then they beat Notre Dame. And then they will beat, I assume, Oregon. Will they get in the playoff?
Well, those are 3 significant wins. And this certainly should vault them, keep them ahead of a Clemson or a North Carolina ACC champion and would make a great comparison for them against. Now, I think if TCU goes undefeated, the Big 12 is strong enough with wins against, they would have wins against Texas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and defeat one of them twice, that I think that keeps an undefeated TCU ahead of them. But if TCU wins the Big 12 with one loss, I think that USC stretch run shoots them right by TCU.
Because, I mean, it's USC.
Yeah, it's USC. UCLA, Notre Dame, and a Pac-12 win against Oregon is no joke. That's strong.
And something to remember: if a Pac-12 team makes it to the playoffs this year, it'll be the first time since 2016 that a Pac-12 team has made it to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right.
Something for Pac-12 fans to remember.
Absolutely.
And it's TCU loses one game, they're out. But 12-team playoff, we're waiting. But I wish we could get to 16 teams instead. That's a little better than 12 teams.
All right, Jackson. Appreciate you being here, man.
Thank you for having me on, Mark.
Absolutely. Have yourself a good night. We'll see you soon.
See you soon, Mark.
All right, Voice of College Football, breaking it all down with all of you. We appreciate all the callers, all the comments, and all the questions there in the live chat. Keep in mind that we're back your way on Wednesday. We will see you at 11 a.m. Eastern time with the Ohio State Buckeyes live show, followed by Michigan, Florida State, and Miami at 5, 6, and 7 Eastern time on their respective channels. Also, keep in mind that our Oklahoma channel that we typically deliver on Wednesday, we knocked that out today. So our Oklahoma Sooners live show is already posted on the Oklahoma channel. So please check that out. Next call-in show on Thursday night. Let's look at the schedule here, the college football schedule, because I usually schedule these Thursday and Friday shows around the games. We really have nothing to deal with there on Thursday. So we've got a Miami show from 8 to 9 on a Thursday. We'll be here live at 9 o'clock Eastern time to take your calls on Thursday night. Then on Friday, we will lead you up to the USC Colorado kickoff at 9:30. So we'll go live, let's say, on Friday from possibly 8 to 9. We'll see what we do there. And then, of course, Saturday night, we wrap it all up. We appreciate the nice showing that we had on Saturday night with about 600 people online and about 8,000 views on the Saturday show. So thank you so much for that. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Man, I post Big Ten rankings. They go through the roof. I post ACC power rankings, nothing. So I will keep the guessing game going in regards to what content you would like to see, as I like to serve our Big 12, ACC, and Pac-12 viewers. Maybe I'll run through some college football playoff resumes and scenarios. Maybe that's what I'll spend my night doing here in the next few days. Right here, the Voice of College Football. See you in 14 hours. Ohio State Buckeyes live at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Thanks for showing up.